Hello again, everybody. So after the first video where we discussed all the generic aspects of how we're going to deal with this as an online class, now in this video, we'll get into all the specific Calc 2, MA 442, all the little things that we need to know. So first and foremost, I want to be very clear. Calc 2 is a difficult course, okay? It's not just that it builds on Calc 1. And I want to make that very clear right off the bat. There are some students, Calc 1 was a tough course already, so they have a lot of nervous energy about what to expect going into Calc 2. And I just want to be very clear. If you are able to get through Calc 1, you're able to handle Calc 2. And it shouldn't just be a complete expectation. Well, if I got an A in Calc 1, I'll get an A in Calc 2. I only got a C plus in Calc 1. I can't do better than that. It goes every direction, everybody. I've had students who've done very well in Calc 1 and are just absolutely miserable and terrible in Calc 2. Oftentimes, part of the reason for that is those students already had a backing in Calc 1. They had already seen a lot of the work in Calc 1 in high school, and in some ways that almost got them ill-prepared, and they thought Calc 1 in college was an easy class, and now all of a sudden they get creamed by work in Calc 2, and they don't have the proper study habits established. So sometimes that happens. It's not always the case, but that's one possibility, and that does happen. And on the complete opposite side of that, I've had students who have really struggled in Calc 1, and then they end up doing very well in Calc 2. I'm not going to necessarily say someone goes from a C to an A, but I've definitely had students that have gone from B's in Calc 1 to A's in Calc 2, or C's in Calc 1 to high B's in Calc 2, and it's the opposite. It's the idea that even though they struggle in Calc 1, that they were learning a lot of their study habits, and it's amazing as you work in Calc 2 how much more you'll understand those earlier Calc 1. So, you've already gotten an email from me, and we've already discussed that hopefully you've looked over some ideas from Calc 1. If you haven't, it's okay. We get some time to review. I've got their Calc 1 review pack. I've got review videos, which you should watch after you finish all of the intro videos and getting used to the class. You really don't want to just jump into the first class video. It'll really be to your benefit. Even if you didn't do much of the review packet, but to flip through, watch the review video, remind yourself about a lot of the basics of Calc 1. Basics of derivatives, basics of antiderivatives, a couple of reminders about limits, about area. I mean, really, we could say remember everything from Calc 1, but I'm kind of strategically pushing you to what I think are the right places. In Calc 2, we really do continue right from the end of Calc 1. Calc 1 ended with the idea of area between curves. We take that and expand right into volume. It's a bit of a tough topic, but then right after we finish that, then we get into new functions. And we get back to a lot of Calc 1 stuff. New functions. We want to know about the functions themselves, some pre-calc aspects of them, some end behavior, some limits, some important values. Then more of the other calc stuff. What are the derivatives? What are the antiderivatives? Now, I could just keep creaming you with Calc 1 problems over and over, but we'll stick with some of the basics. In the review packet, taking the derivatives, knowing about the idea of the critical values, the critical numbers, where the derivative is zero or undefined. Remembering the idea about the connection between derivatives and tangent lines, to be able to find the equation of a tangent line to a curve. For antiderivatives, the connection between the definite integral and area under the curve. We'll continue with those aspects. So some of that, you may already be saying like, oh, I'm in some trouble. You're not in trouble, but you just got to make sure you're going back and planning on going back and doing the review. Take advantage. This first week is basically introduction and review, and then week 2 will get started. We'll have a quiz not that far into the semester, but you really can, I mean, some students need to really keep up with a lot of review in the beginning, and that's really going to be what keys them to doing well throughout the semester. So, I wanted to say that right off the bat, and now let's get into some of our specifics. Oh, I guess there's one other quick thing I should mention. In general, you could print as much or as little as you want in this class. Okay, I've got some syllabi printed, and my class notes, some people print them all, some people print none. When I actually give you tests and quizzes, some people really like to print those out and work on the test and quiz. Other people just don't. Like I said, everything, they've got their computer, their tablet, their smartphone, whatever, that any of their sources they could view from there. The videos, again, the notes, all of it is accessible in some way. Like I said, if you like to print it, you can go ahead. If you don't want to, that's fine too. But the second thing, the importance of taking notes. Calc 2 is a class that for a lot of majors, it's not that you need calculus itself to move on, but they want to make sure you're thinking. You're the way you think, and that they know Calc 2 is a tough class. So it's kind of like this is a class to prove your mettle, to prove that you've got the goods to then move on into those next level classes. So even if, again, you're not a math person, this still is kind of that bridge to the next level science class, the next level, if any of the health people, PT, OT, nursing. Not all of you need to go to this level of calculus, but for some of you, this proves you're ready to take that next level for science, for business. So a lot of people, a lot of majors require this. And I bring that up, some of the skills that you develop. Now, online, as we kind of mentioned, some of the benefits is that you could always look something up. If you've got your notes, again, in person, I'm not giving you open book tests, but with this online nature, you could always look things up. But there's still good habits with regard to taking notes, and you don't want to forget about those things. And we don't want to forget there's a connection between our hand and our brain. So for some of us, especially those who are going to move on to Calc 3, there's going to be things you want to memorize. A derivative, an FF prime chart, to be able to take derivatives going this way, antiderivatives, integrals going that way. You're going to want to memorize some of these things. Maybe some of the trig facts. There's a lot of people that you've passed trig. You've always been able to do it in the individual places, but now you see trig. Trig gets mixed a lot more in Calc 2 than in other classes. I typically tell my Calc 1 classes, it takes this much trig to do well in Calc 1, this much trig to get an A in Calc 1. Well, in Calc 2, it takes this much trig to pass Calc 2. It takes this much trig to get an A in Calc 2. But we're going to do it together. I'll still give you reminders. And I have old videos from different classes that if you need some extra reminders on trig, that you have good places, good resources that I could share with you. In general, I mentioned already using the notes. Your textbook we'll talk a little bit more about in a few minutes. Videos and notes, Talk about the textbook. I'm going to share 2 other resources from the department. One of the other department members has a nice little extra book, extra problems with full solutions. A lot of students like that. Just again, that extra experience and practice goes a long way in preparing for Calc 2. There's also another math professor. He has a whole series of videos from all different topics. I like to let you know, in addition to my videos, some people like, you don't want too many voices in your ear, but some people like a second voice, someone else to reaffirm. Even if you don't like his voice, but another place to look and see full solution problems. Problem, full solution. Even if you turn off his audio, but you could just see the work and have that as an extra resource to give you some extra practice. So, a lot of things to consider. Like I said, Calc 2 is tough, but we've got a lot of good ways to make sure you're prepared, but it's got to be through you. And like I always say, if you're just looking up answers online, you're really going to get yourself in trouble in Calc 2. Just a lot of ways you can put yourself in a hole. But again, writing things out, just a good learning technique in general. By writing things out, there's an extra connection in the brain, and that really helps with recall. Okay, so let's get into our syllabi. We've got the department syllabus, and we've got my individual syllabus. So let's start off looking at the department syllabus. Again, this is Calc 2. I've got it open on my computer, or print it out, again, whichever you prefer. So Calc 2 has Calc 1 as a prerequisite. So I kind of mentioned, we still come from a lot of different places, because even though we've all had Calc 1 some experience, maybe it's like, you took an AP exam and now you just placed into Calc 2, or, whatever your situation is to get here, we still have a lot of different backgrounds. Some students, they started at college, they started at, really at the beginning. They did algebra, they did trig, they did pre-calculus, they did Calc 1, they did Calc 2. And for those students, for a lot of you, you keep seeing the progression that each of those follow-up classes is like another notch higher, a little bit longer with the level of difficulty, with the nature of the problems, the nature of the concepts, of the techniques. So you've got a lot of experience, and that you could use that experience to know about yourself. How much work does it take? When do I know I'm ready to move on to the next section? So that's what I mean. Some people, you feel like you've started at the beginning, but through your experience, you're in a very, very good position to be successful from day one. For other people who've kind of like jumped right in, or maybe, again, I know some students, particularly because they've had a good background from calculus in high school, they could really kind of coast through Calc 1. But even if you took AP calculus in high school, about a month into Calc 2, you're going to start seeing some completely new, and some are pretty advanced ideas compared to Calc 1. So if you don't already have some good habits established, you could really hit a bit of a wall in that early part of the semester and start to, again, dig a deep hole that you could really have to take some time to figure things out and to get yourself back on track. So again, let's try and avoid that. Even if you were very successful in Calc 1, let's already start with a plan for when we're going to work, how much time we're going to take, and be ready to adjust. That maybe you get off to a good, easy start, but that you're always ready to turn it up if you need to when we get to some of the harder topics. So we've all come out of Calc 1. We've all been able to successfully pass Calc 1, so we're ready to work in Calc 2. Hours, 4 class hours, 1 resuscitation hour, 5 class hours per week. Like I said in the first video, that leads to 5 to 15 extra hours to 10 to 20 total hours per week. That should be your framework, okay? A lot of work in Calc 2. Our exact schedule would be Monday and Wednesday, 8 to 10:30 at night. That is a really tough in-person schedule. I've taught that class several times, and some people, it's the time that works for them, but for a lot of students, that's late. The brain is tired by that point in the day. To then sit for 2.5 hours, that's a tough schedule. But again, if that's the schedule that works for you, that's a time frame, that's a good way to get started, to get the initial instructional videos, but then make sure you're ready to, have extra time to get through homework, to review, to practice. You're definitely going to want to do that. But again, that's not the friendliest schedule. So maybe you already want to plan, 5 1-hour sessions. Have like a 1-hour session every day during the week, and then have some extra study over the weekend. So again, your options. Other people just break it up. They'll do some work in the morning and then some work at night before they go to bed. So again, just to make sure that you're giving yourself enough time and that it's good time, productive time. I say this a lot in person when students tell me before a test, Professor, I studied for 4 hours yesterday and I didn't understand anything. It's like, you didn't study for 4 hours then. You probably studied for, between 10 and 30 minutes, and then you just banged your head off the wall for the next 3+ hours. It's like, that's not productive. If you really hit that wall and you're not understanding, you want to have the time, you want to have the plan so that you can email me, get some instruction, get some extra help, go use your extra resources, see, if you need an appointment with the help center, have time to make that appointment and meet with that person. So again, a lot of planning involved, but you want to have a good time frame in mind right from the beginning of the semester. And again, be ready to adjust as we go along. The class description, Well, it's a continuation of Calc 1. So we're going to have transcendental functions, new functions, e to the x, log x. A lot of you will remember that, but we'll start from the beginning with those, some basics. We'll get deeper with trig, infinite series. Students will develop problem-solving skills, construct models. They talk about computer laboratory. Technically, we have some time in the computer lab to use this program called Maple. How much are we going to do with that in an online session? Not much. We'll see if there are any new options. There were some suggestions last semester we could link our computers to get access to the software. It didn't work great. Maple is not a cheap program, so we'll see. We'll see exactly how much we do with that. We'll at least do a little bit to cover the component. Maple is, in a lot of ways, like a super calculator. So we'd like to at least show you some basics, but we'll see exactly what we can do with that. Curricula for which the course is required, any AS program, math, science, engineering. Again, some people take calculus because other programs may need it eventually, and they just want to get those general math credits. Calc 2 will cover you no matter what you need, essentially. But there are some specific courses that, like I said earlier, even if you're not going to use calculus as a chemistry major, for example, there's calculus in chemistry. So you want to have some of the understanding of how, even if you don't specifically use it, but to understand how it's involved, because it is. There are areas where it overlaps and integrates. But the second thing is, again, it's the skills, it's the discipline, it's the ability to say, hey, if you could pass this tough class in math and do things in this abstract way, you could definitely are ready to handle this next level class. You have the discipline and the skill to be able to do it. Okay, our textbook. This is the instructor's edition, but this is the book itself. Okay, if you look it up, it is a Stewart calculus book. Now, Stewart is a very common, popular calc author. This is the 8th edition, and ideally this is what you'd have so that everything matches up perfectly. But I have to be honest, there's a couple of things to say. Number one, there are notes options that are available. Let me just look this up super fast. That if you can get just a little notes option, and that gives you a cheaper book. So it's not bound. Okay, that's one of the biggest aspects of it. Yeah, that's it. It's available for sale in the bookstore. So that's one option. Some people rent the book. That certainly works. This is the same book that you used for Calc 1. So if you have it, of course, that's great as well. It's just a continuation. A few other things to point out, though. I'm not going to grade or collect your homework. If you have an older edition of this book, the 7th edition, the 6th edition, I actually have down in my little book corner down in my corner here, I've got, I think it's the 3rd edition. It's the same author. There's very little changes in the book. So as long as you're looking up by topic, you'll still see everything basically matches, but the page numbers will be off. That when we do section it's either 5.2 or 5.3 is where we begin with volume. And in some of the older editions, it's just chapter 6, because what he called the prerequisite chapter and then chapter 1 in this book, well, the prerequisite was chapter 1 in an older book, and chapter 1 here was chapter 2. But the topics are all the same order. Or some of them, it's the exact same topics and sections, but just the page numbers are off. Like the 7th edition, so similar, but he adds an extra example problem here and there. They add an extra homework problem. So again, having a book is important. You need homework. That is a must in calculus. To get good practice, to be able to say, I understand. It's easy to sit back and watch the video and say, okay, I get it, one line to the next. But the nature of the problems, to make sure your arithmetic, your algebra, your graphing, your trig skills, all those things, all that background stuff It's easy to watch a video and say, okay, yeah, I got it. But for you to be good with all that stuff, you need practice. So all the homework comes from the book. But in addition, you should be reading over the book, okay? Like I said in that first video, whether you do it as like a little warm-up to give yourself a little sense of what the section is going to be about, or you flip through after you watch the video just to get a little extra reinforcement. Like I said, it doesn't have to be, what are your study times? Well, sometimes just taking 15 to 30 minutes, flipping through your notes, flipping through the book, reminding yourself the types of problems, looking over a few of the examples. I mean, these are all beneficial, good study habits to get used to. If you ever hit a wall with the homework, well, I mean, I should point out, all the homework, odd problems, answers, odds are all in the back of the book, the answers for the odd problems. But if you ever hit a little bit of a problem with homework, almost every homework section, if you see like, I'm not quite sure those directions or this problem feels a little weird, flip back a few pages. Pretty much every type of problem he asks in the book, in the homework sections, he's got an example leading up to it. And that example can get you back on track. Oh, that's what he means by that direction. Let me get started. Then once I get started, now I realize where to continue. So that's certainly a good thing. The last thing I just want to mention, how much homework should you do? Most of it. Should you get all of it? Well, like most math books, the problems tend to get harder. That when you get to the beginning of a homework, problems like, 1 through 11 are fairly basic. Trying to get you, they're like that very, very basic just to make sure you're getting the right first step, the right idea, seeing a problem with a very, very basic type of function. So we get that at the beginning. Then you kind of get to like a middle part of the homework. That's what I refer to as like that middle of the road. And that's what most of our test and quiz problems are going to be like, as far as like the level of difficulty. But then at the end of the homework, there are typically some challenge problems. That's where if you get to the end and you felt good, like I really say, if you've been going through and you've successfully solved 3/4 of the homework problems, you're fine. You're in a very, very good situation. If you want to go look up those other problems, email me, get some extra answers, of course, but you should feel comfortable. Again, assuming you're starting from scratch, working on your own, and getting the correct answer for 3/4, you're in a very good position. If you find yourself flipping back, going through your notes to remind yourself, going through previous examples, flipping through, watching a video, things like that, maybe you want to schedule some extra time to come back. But again, that's a good measure of homework. Can you get most of it? If the answer is yes, you're in a good situation. If you know it's like the last 2 or 3 homework problems, and how many is it? Well, it varies per section, but almost every homework section, there is 1 to 3 of those end problems, just to try and challenge you to think a little harder. And those, for some students, I think it's at least worthwhile to look them over, but even if you don't try them, that's not a bad thing. Like I said, it's just a little extra enhancement, trying to get you to think a little more, make a few extra connections, and all of those little things you do will make those earlier problems a little bit easier, but you certainly don't want to give yourself a hard time over those problems. So, there's the book. We need the book. Some access, some way, shape, or form. The last thing here, Stewart, he also puts out these, they call it calculus with transcendental functions. Same ideas, but those e's and log functions I talked about, they get into those right in the beginning of Calc 1. They don't wait till Calc 2. So that's the one Stewart book you probably want to stay away from. You could make it work, but that one you're going to have to do some hard work on your own to make everything match up. But any of the other regular, just says calculus, doesn't say anything extra, the regular Stewart calculus books, that will be enough to get you on track. Okay, so what's next? Next, moving along, calculator, scientific or graphing calculator is required. Not much, everybody. There's a couple of sections. We'll do a couple of word problems. And it's kind of like some previous classes. In a math class, if the answer to a problem is x equals the square root of 2, well, we'd like you to leave the answer as the square root of 2. If it's the square root of 9, you should simplify that and say that's 3. But the square root of 2, we don't want the decimal approximate 1.414, blah, blah, blah. We want the exact answer. Same thing, that's going to happen in Calc 2 with some of our functions. But there are going to be some spots, a couple of spots where we've got a little bit of a word problem, and how long until the population of bacteria reaches this level. Well, we don't want to say it'll take the square root of 2 days. That's where we would like the decimal approximate. So again, nothing crazy. Scientific calculator, graphing calculator, either one. To be quite honest, in this online setting, I mean, I would not let you use your smartphone in class because there's too many other things you could do with your smartphone. But in this online setting, a lot of the smartphones have good calculators built in, or again, just your computer, just to do an online search. And Google has calculators that you could access. So some way for those problems, we're going to need the calculator. How are you going to be evaluated? We've got 60% for the exams, assignments, classroom performance, 60% for the in-person portion of the class. And for us, that's quizzes and tests. Like I said in that first video, not collecting or grading homework. That's for you. That's your measuring stick. So you should be doing that as a measure to make sure you're prepared, but you're ultimately being graded on the tests and quizzes. So your tests and quizzes will always have plenty of announcement, at least a week in advance, and we'll talk more about that. But that's where you're going to get your 60%. Points earned divided by points possible. You get a 25 out of 30 on a quiz. You get an 80 out of 100 on a test. That's 105 points earned divided by 130. That's a decimal, that's a percentage. That's where that 60% is coming from. We still have 10% for Maple. And again, in person, we'd be doing that together. I don't give any separate Maple assignments. We do some things with Maple together, and as long as you do them while we're in class, you'd get that full credit. So that 10%, that's basically going to be given to you in some way. So that's a nice little boost. It's a tough class. I don't feel bad. I actually feel pretty good about having that as a nice little boost for you. The final exam, cumulative, 30%. Your tests and quizzes will be the guide for you on, again, how to prepare for your final exam. I'll mention a little bit more about tests and quizzes in a few minutes. Academic integrity. Well, we're not, we don't have any papers or anything, so we don't have to worry about plagiarizing. Your tests, you do get to work at home. You do have that take-home aspect, so use your resources. As I keep suggesting, I think it's in your best interest. Take the test like you normally would. Take the test. If you, study as you normally would, have some time prepared. If when you take that test, you feel like, wow, forgot so many of these things, well, have a plan, have the time to go back. Take advantage of the online format. Say, well, I've had 2 problems I was a little unsure of, or I have 10 problems I was a little unsure of. Have the time to go back, check your notes, watch another video as necessary. Take advantage of this format so that those tests and quizzes go well. But it still has to be your work. Follow the reasonable work. Make sure you're showing me. Make sure you follow the instructions. And like I said, that'll be fine, but we don't have to worry about any plagiarism or anything there. Disabilities, any students who have any, you can get any accommodation, you let me know, we'll take care of that. And now the topics. And you can see we've got a bunch. We got a couple of sections in Chapter 5, a lot in Chapter 6, a lot in Chapter 7, a little in Chapter 8, a lot in Chapter 11. So we've got a lot to get through. So I've got to keep pushing us along. But again, you could always still make sure you're keeping up, even if you need to go back a little bit, even if we finish some previous work, but you could still always send me questions because it's going to come up on your final exam. So, quizzes and tests. What I do here is a little different than what some people expect, because a lot of people have the idea a quiz covers a small portion, and then we finish a unit and the test covers everything. But what I do, every quiz and every test is completely independent from the previous. Quizzes are when we cover small portions, and tests are when we cover big chunks. So again, looking at those topics, we cover sections 5.2 and 5.3. Those are our volumes. That's all we're doing from chapter 5. It's just 2 sections. That's a quiz. Typically I think it's a 40 to 50 point quiz. Then chapter 6, we cover the whole chapter, and there's a lot there. So quiz 1 covers chapter 5. Test 1 covers chapter 6. There's no overlap from quiz 1 to test 1. And then moving along, chapter 7 is another lengthy chapter. That gets its own test. Chapter 8 is short and quick. That's a quiz. Then chapter 11 is pretty lengthy, so we just break that up a little bit. I give you a test on 11.1 through 11.7, and then a quiz on the end, 11.8 through 11.10. So when all said and done, 3 quizzes, 3 tests, that will be where you get your 60%. And again, I'll still give you plenty of advance notice as we go along when those quizzes and tests are coming up, but you already have that as a sense. Quiz 1, followed by test 1, followed by test 2, followed by quiz 2, then test 3. Quiz 3 is very often like our last day of the semester, and then we have our final exam. So that's overall, that's our schedule. That covers the main syllabus. And now just quickly looking over my quick little addendum here, a few things that are just kind of unnecessary. I mean, first, my name, again, I'm Eric Sponza. My email, you have it up here in the corner, esponza@qcc.cuny.edu. Any emails, make sure you send that to me through that address. My phone number in my office. My phone number is in my office. I do not have access to that. I'm not going to campus this semester, at least don't have any real plans to. So any information, questions, concerns, questions about homework, about planning, schedule, anything that comes up, send it through email. If we do need any other method of communication, we could set that up. But everything starts through email. My office hours, well, I do have official office hours. But for this semester, again, you're working on your schedule, so you email me when you have questions. As long as you have, I check my email every day, weekend, weekday, mostly multiple times each day. So as long as you're giving yourself enough time and you're planning things accordingly, you'll always have time to get my email, to get my response to your emails, what I mean to say, and then be able to continue and move on. So whether you're able to do an entire video, do most of the homework and just have a few questions, or you hit a wall, you're in the middle of a video, you got lost, you're confused, you need to ask, again, you'll have time, send me the email, but send it to me there, and then again, we'll move along. Don't look for office hours in particular. You send me questions when you have them, and I'll get back to you. So again, we could really make this asynchronous schedule work to your advantage. A few additional notes. Normally, talk about no cell phones in class. They don't help. Well, we don't have to worry about that. You're working on your schedule. But I would recommend when you're working, right, put your cell phone aside. Focus on the material. Keep yourself engaged when you're watching the videos the same way you'd be engaged like you were in person in a classroom. Putting your head down, be asked to leave. Again, those are distractions in person. If you're that exhausted, pause the video. Go take a break. Just come back to it, of course. Number 3, that one's still important. Email sent to me should be grammatically correct. Like I just said a moment ago, email is our main form of communication. I want to make sure our emails that when you send me something, I can already get back to you to start answering your question. If you have problems like anything schedule, if you have some solutions that you're thinking about, let me know. I may not be able to give you exactly what you want, but if you give me that kind of framework, I could already think about that as I try and give proposed solutions. But we don't want to have too much time going back and forth with you send me an email and I have to send you back, who are you, what do you want? Like, let's already get past that point. So emails should make it clear who you are, your name, your class. Every email you send to me, I know it's easy sometimes for you, you just hit a quick reply, but realize I'm answering a lot of emails each day. So always include who you are, what class you're in, and then always to the best of your ability, how can I help you? Now, two things I want to say here. Number one, the difference between your personal contacts and your professional contacts. Keep me on the professional side. So, a lot of people are using their smartphones as a way to access their email, but don't send me text type. Now, you don't have to give me a whole bunch of big fluff and, how are you doing today? What a lovely day. You can jump right to the point. Hello, professor, I'm having this problem. Can you help me? But make it clear who you are, what class you're in, what's the problem, how can I help you? That's the best way. And again, if you have proposed solutions, that's great. Or if you're having problems, don't just, I'm having trouble. Try and be as specific as you can. I am having trouble with this section. I am having trouble with this problem. Now, when you start using the help center, keep in mind, they are help, okay? Definitely, if you talk to them, you want to have those specifics. So you can say to them, well, not just, I can't do this topic, it's you want to be able to say, I'm having trouble with this problem. I want to look at this problem from the homework. I want to look at this example he did in the video. You want to have those specifics. You can't always, I know sometimes when you have trouble, be that specific with me, but to try to be. So like I said, just so that we make our email exchanges as efficient as possible. Okay, notes on grading. Like we said, 3 tests, 3 quizzes, always will be announced at least 1 week ahead of time. Kind of gave you a big sense overall as far as when they'll be coming up, as far as topics and section, but I'll always give you that date for that schedule. Your in-class average, points earned divided by points possible. So, how do you weigh a 30-point quiz versus a 50-point quiz versus a 100-point test? Points earned divided by points possible. Okay. The last thing, any issues with exams, you gotta let me know in advance. If you fall behind a little bit with your classwork, if you want to let me know that something's been going on, that's fine, but you don't have to. Just try and make sure you get back on track. You fell behind, you only did half of this week's work or even less than that. Well, just make sure you make a plan to adjust for it the next week to get extra time. But if tests, quiz days, something comes up that day, that's a day you really have to let me know. You get a 0 if you don't submit a test or a quiz on time. That's a tough grade to overcome. But if you just have one poor test or one poor quiz, you could overcome that through some good work, but you just have to make sure you're letting me know and staying on schedule. Attendance, in person, I talk about good attendance is every day. Successful students will attend all classes, complete all assignments. Well, the online version of that is you're gonna watch all the videos, read all the emails, and still complete all the homework. That's the key to make sure you're on track and you will be successful. I have a few other notes and, regarding some individual days with our schedule. We only meet 1 day this week, but you could see that and I'll remind us as we get closer. I have a little note about winter travel, being safe and being smart, but again, hopefully we're already doing this from the safety of home, so we don't have to worry about that as well. So that's basically it for this video. We have a 3rd video to still watch regarding the submissions of exams and a few other notes and just some things to discuss there. You definitely want to get into the review, everybody. So you've watched these videos, you're familiar with the class itself, but for Calc 2, you really want to make sure you get off of the right step, get off to a good first step, I should say. Watch the review videos, go through the packets, let me know if you have any questions, and we'll be ready to get started with the real Calc 2 work at the beginning of next week.